name's Matt Fox, and I'm a parental narcissistic abuse recovery expert. I work with adults who are raised by a narcissist or who experience childhood emotional neglect to get over their childhood hurts, feel more self-confident, build their self-esteem, and really live their life with the power and authenticity that they're looking for. So today I'm looking at the 30 signs that you were parented by a narcissist or that you experienced childhood emotional neglect. And I'm going to break these down into 3 separate parts just to make them a little bit more digestible. So let's get started. And the first one is that you probably feel quite alone. And this is really common for people who are parented by a narcissist, that even though they might be connected with friends, they have good friendship groups and social life, they still sometimes feel a bit on the outside or alone, never quite feeling like you're a part of something. And that can really come back to that childhood experience of not really feeling seen or being included for who you are in your life, in your family. Okay, number 2, you probably second guess yourself all the time. It's really hard to stick by your decisions and not give yourself a really hard time. You go round and round in circles, checking whether you might have made the wrong decision. And again, the sense of finding it hard to trust that you can make proper decisions in your life is a really strong sign that you had that kind of emotional neglect in your childhood, or you were parented by a narcissist. Okay, 3, you're probably really attuned to other people's feelings. You might even be an empath. You certainly will be reading people for signs of anger or anxiety or displeasure, possibly in sadness. But at the same time, you might find it really hard to name your own feelings. The experience of people who've been parented by a narcissist is often to cut off from their own feelings, to no longer know what those feelings really are, or to be able to name them. So that can be very typical, but you can still have this really strong attunement to other people's feelings. Okay, number 4. Number 4 is really a build on this. You find it really not only easy, but kind of you're drawn to take care of other people's needs, but it's really hard to take care of your own. So your first impulse will always be to make sure other people are okay ahead of you. And again, that will be a really, there's a strong causal link between that and your childhood experience, where you probably had to take care of your mum or dad's needs emotionally. It's what we call parentifying. And if you're in that situation where actually your own emotional needs were set aside for the needs of a parent, then this can be the outcome. That you find it really hard to take care of your own needs, even though you find it really easy to take care of other people's needs. Okay, number 5. People who've had that experience of growing up in a narcissistic family often experience social anxiety. And by social anxiety, I mean that in social situations, you can have an overwhelming sense of fear, of disturbance, like you're not really deserving to be there. You might have imposter syndrome, or like people won't find you interesting, or you're inadequate in some way compared to other people. So that social anxiety can be really overwhelming for people who've been parented by a narcissist. Okay, number 6. And I should say with number 5, with the social anxiety, that you might also find groups very difficult. They might feel dangerous, hostile, like you can't really settle in them. And depending on what happened to you in your childhood and whether you had siblings or not, this could be an outcome of being parented by a narcissist as well, where the group dynamics remain fundamentally unsafe. Okay, number 6. When things go wrong in a relationship, and I'm talking about friendship here, or an intimate relationship, or even at work, you feel like you have to be the one to fix it, and you'll make the first step 9 times out of 10. So this is, again, is a typical response of somebody who's been parented by a narcissist, because in your childhood, you would have had to put things right. A narcissistic parent would never accept that they're wrong. They might do that overtly, or they might do that covertly, right, by going silent on you, or cold shouldering you, or sulking. So you would always be having to make that first move. And often your other parent, if they were around, would have colluded with that, kind of strong arming you into being the one to make the apology or to fix things. Okay, number 8. Number 7. I mean, we've been talking about this theme all along in a sense. It's really hard to trust. And this feeling is that when you get to meet somebody new, whether it's making a friend or in an intimate relationship, there's a part of you that's always holding back because there's a sort of latent fear of attack or being undermined or not really being seen or valued for who you are. So that can happen really often for people who've been parented by a narcissist, that they hold back from that fear of trust. Or sometimes it gets played out the opposite way, which is actually you trust too quickly. And I'll come on to that in the next one, really, because there's a part of you that just is craving that approval. And so you kind of leap in feet first, whether that's safe or not. So, yeah, number 8, that need for approval can be really strong. And it can have a positive side. I mean, when you grow up in a narcissistic family, you wouldn't have received much approval for who you are unless you met certain criteria. And often that's kind of high achievement or being really compliant and good or following that parent's rules. So that kind of approval isn't very healthy. You might find that the approval of, in a healthy way, which comes from mentors or trusted friends, can be really life-changing because they can affirm you and support you in your decisions and make you feel like you're making the right choices off your own bat without having to make the choice for you. That's kind of a positive approval. But when you're seeking approval for approval's sake, because it gives you a quick fix, because that's what you were used to, then that's kind of on the unhealthy end of the spectrum for approval. Okay, number 9. This one's a really tough one to talk about. And I want to tread softly with it, but in my experience, people who've been parented by a narcissist or who grew up with emotional neglect can often end up in situations where they're bullied or marginalised. And when I say that, I don't mean in any way that they attract that consciously or they go out of their way to put themselves in a victim place, not at all. But I do find that that experience of being overpowered or bullied or marginalised in your childhood experience can then translate into repeating that pattern in adulthood. And therapy and coaching are great for breaking that, or your own kind of willpower, I suppose, and awareness. Okay, and the last one for this first section is about ambivalence with your body. So, in my experience, people who've been parented by a narcissist often struggle with naming their feelings, but they also have an ambivalent relationship with their body, particularly when a parent was intrusive or invasive in their space. If you were heavily criticised for your appearance, your personal appearance, or your clothing, or you only got approval when you looked a certain way, then you can start to have a real kind of distancing. And I'll talk about dissociation and numbing out a little bit later, but you can have real distancing of yourself and kind of disconnection with your body. And in more extreme cases, that can really turn into kind of almost loathing of your body as well, because it doesn't feel like it's your own. So that's our first 10 signs that you were parented by a narcissist. You don't have to experience all of them, or some of them. They're all on a spectrum. You might experience them to a certain degree, but they're usually quite telling of whether you've been parented by a narcissist. So I'm going to go on to part 2 in the next video, where you can find out the next 10 signs. You can always check out my articles at www.mattdfox.com for more information on parental narcissistic abuse, and you can sign up for my regular updates and get my free guide on finding inner peace, the 10 steps to recovery from narcissistic abuse. Okay, see you soon. Thanks.